up, y'all? This is Neena Perez, and this is Straight Talk, No Sugar Added. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. You know, I go around this amazing planet finding the best humans on it to come on here to grow, challenge, and transform your thinking. And I found a really cool chick, let me tell you, okay? Me and her are having some fun already. Her name is Diann Wingert, and she is a business strategist and coach helping entrepreneurial women unlock their brilliance so that they can create a profitable, sought-after business in their zone of genius. So you already know this is going to be a good conversation. Hi, Diann. How are you?
I have been so looking forward to this, and we are going to have fun and change lives, as you have
That's
already
right.
promised.
That's right. You know, I love having conversations like this because I feel like, strategists, coaches, like all of us are really trying to just pull the brilliance out of people. And it's just I think, podcasting or this is a great way and a great platform to do that, right? So I'm glad you're here. I cannot wait to get into our conversation. But Diann, before we get started, I always like to ask, who are you? Who is Diann? Let us know.
First and foremost, I am a survivor. It was one of the
Mm,
reasons why I think you and I just naturally were meant to connect and make magic together. I grew up in an extremely abusive, chaotic,
mm,
adoptive family where kids were coming and going, and I was determined to survive it and get the heck out of there. And so I
mhm.
did. That was just the beginning of a very interesting life. I've been married 3 times. I have 3 kids. I usually have 3 books on my nightstand at any given time. And until recently, I had 3 dogs. Apparently, I like the number 3. I've also
3.
I'm also in my 3rd career.
Right. Isn't that fun? Not all the other stuff, but the third career part. I know
It all
it's
it
fun
all
we're
helps
good
you
too.
grow, girl. It all
Yeah, it
helps you
really
grow.
does. It really does. Do you mind if we get a little bit into like some of the challenges that you've had to overcome? Like what were those traumas and challenges that you saw like I got to get out of here? What was that?
Starting all the way back in childhood, I had an abusive adoptive mother and an absent father. And we happened to live in a very nice neighborhood where a lot of
Mhm.
people don't think abuse happens. And of course, no one's looking for it.
Right.
I think I realized early on that if I was going to survive my childhood, I was going to have to do something that I'll be honest, I'm not proud of. And that is save myself.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
was one of
Mhm.
the older children in this family, and I was marshaling all of my inner resources to get through it, to do what I needed to do well in school so that I could go to college and move on with my life. But what that meant was that I had a lot of what shrinks will call survivor guilt. I could
Ah.
not save any of those other kids. And frankly, I didn't even try, which is why my second career, which lasted for over 25 years, was as a psychotherapist working with abused and neglected kids.
Wow. Wow. So that, well, first of all, right? Have you given yourself some grace on that, growing up and having to survive? I'm sure you have, right? As a
Yes.
psychotherapist, right?
No, no, no.
Uh,
I've done my own therapy for years,
yeah,
and
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Because that's tough, right, Diane? I mean, I do get that. I do, because when I left my mother's home, I think I was like 16 or something, and I never looked back.
Mhm.
I never went back. I
Same.
never looked back. So my siblings stayed with my mom, and I visited once in a whatever moon. And but I did the same. I think sometimes it is survival. It's literally what you're trying to do is just get your head above water. And at the time I had a kid too, because I had a child at 15 years old. So it
Mhm.
was me and him trying to survive. So I totally get that. So
Yeah.
what made you look back and say, okay, I really need to do something to help those that are struggling with abuse? What made you do that?
I had a point where my first career was in medical sales. It was very lucrative. At that time, I was one of very few women who was
Mm-hmm.
selling
Mm-hmm.
orthopedic implants because it was lucrative. It was totally male dominated. I don't have to explain that to you, right?
Right.
So, um, but I also was married and had several young kids. So I was on the road a lot. I was away from home a lot, and I was contributing a lot to the family. But I had a lot of conflict in myself about not
Mm-hmm.
being with my family as much as I wanted to be. And then I had a pretty serious car accident, one that left me
Mm.
unable to work for over a year. During that time, I had a little bit of a, I guess you could call it a spiritual awakening. And I realized that that accident could have ended my life, and it didn't. And if all I do is recover from this physical trauma and go
Right.
right back to the life I had before, I think I'm missing the point. So
Mm,
I started doing some volunteer work in a local family services agency. They assigned me immediately to work with abused women and their children. Next thing you know, I was almost like counseling people with no training, no degree, because
right.
the need was so great.
Life.
And I realized, number one, I was really good at it.
Right.
And number two, it infused me with much more of a sense of meaning that increasing the market share for my employer ever did in medical sales. So
Mm,
I told my then husband, um, I want to go back to school. I want to get a master's in social work, and I want to start, helping people. And it became a very, I didn't go back thinking I want to work with abused and neglected kids.
right.
It sort of found me once I got into the field, and I was extremely gifted at it because I'd been through it. I understood it. I recognized it. I survived it. So I had
Mm,
credibility with those kids. I think what was hard for me, Neena, is that the system is pretty effed up.
yeah.
And oftentimes, because of mandates, we are returning kids to the very families that traumatized them to begin with. The
Hmm.
kid's
Hmm.
gotten tons of therapy, but maybe the family hasn't really progressed. And that was really hard for me because, believe it or not, after all I've been through in life, I'm still very idealistic.
Hmm. Hmm. And it must be really tough too, right? Because, at some point you almost kind of give up on the system too, because it's just such an uphill battle. And it's something like, I think we all try to like chip away at some of the things that we see. But it is a battle. And so let me go back a little bit though.
Sure.
So when you had your accident, and you were home, that must have been a really hard impact on your family, right? Because
Hmm.
you also said your business was very lucrative, so I'm sure that that hurt it in that way too. Did you find that very difficult that year to get through, besides the physical?
To be honest with you, I think well, first of all, I never fully recovered from that accident. So,
Mm,
in a nutshell, I have been living with chronic pain since 1987.
wow.
I've had tons and tons of treatment. I've seen multiple, neurosurgeons who all basically told me I wouldn't touch you with a 10-foot pole because if the surgery didn't go well, you would be a paraplegic. So I just decided to live with it. And that's a whole other
Mm,
conversation, whole other
right.
journey. But it wasn't so much the financial impact, because it did happen while I was at work. So they couldn't fire me.
Right.
It was basically being impaired and limited physically, and most of all psychologically, being in a
Mhm.
dependent position. You're a fellow
Mhm.
badass. You have been through some major league
Mhm.
shit, and you know very well that a big part of your personality that developed was this strong, self-sufficient human being. So I was neither strong nor self-sufficient, and that was the
That's
hardest part
hard.
for me
Yeah,
to deal
that's
with.
hard.
I
Yeah.
felt dependent, and I
Yeah.
hate that feeling.
Right.
Hate it.
Right.
Still do.
Right. I was just gonna say, how you feeling about that today, Diane? I
Still hate
know.
it.
It's so true, isn't it? It's so true. I've learned throughout the years to soften a little bit because it was hard on my marriage to be always so headstrong.
Yes.
But I still am. I still am. It's just innate. It's in me, right? So I
Yes.
think that's the survival thing, right? You start to learn skills and survival tactics that really can serve you really well, serves you well in life if you use it the right way, right?
And if
So,
you develop the self-awareness to realize that
mhm,
this was necessary to see me through,
yep,
and now it is no longer skillful. So it's up to me to kind of dial back on some of that,
yeah,
like you say, headstrong
yeah,
and so forth, because it does make it hard for relationships, including your marriage.
yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. I'm on my second marriage because of
I'm
that
on my
too.
third, darling.
Totally get that. So Diane, tell me, how did you shift then? How did you go from, working with the traumatized children and everything to now really wanting to impact women and taking out their zone of genius? What happened there?
Well, it's one of my favorite stories because what I realize is that every woman who's fortunate enough to live to midlife goes through some major transformation. You
Yeah.
look like you're about that age, so you know
Yep.
exactly what I'm talking
Yep.
about. When we hit midlife and the hormones are raging and, you know, the kids are growing up, everything on your dance card comes up for review. I
Hmm.
think it's biological, psychological, sociological. It's just normal. So when
Right.
I hit
Right.
midlife, I had another one of these awakenings. The first one was the accident. And I thought, well, I'm not doing anything meaningful with my life. And if I were to have died, I feel like kind of embarrassed of myself that I didn't spend my one human life on something more important. So then I spent 25 years. I was a psychotherapist. I was a professor of social work. I trained hundreds of people to come into the field and do what I do. I'm very
Wow.
proud of that work. I'm
Yeah.
proud of the programs that I created and all the families that I impacted, some of whom are still in contact with me so many years later.
That's so good.
But once I went through my own midlife wake up call, if you will, I realized that I felt like I had paid back, you know, like you talk about pay it
Yeah.
forward, pay it back.
Yeah.
I felt like I had done what I needed to do to help other people who were at that level of human struggle.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
what I really wanted to do next was shift the conversations I was having from problems to possibilities.
Oh, that's good.
And that I realized meant that I had outgrown my role as a therapist and I had actually grown into the role of a coach. So
Mm.
I decided to make it official, went through the training and certification and have continued on. And initially it was life coaching,
Hmm.
but that really felt so much like therapy to me
Right.
that I decided what's really the most empowering thing I can do is to help other women create and grow their own successful, sustainable business because I've been through 2 divorces, because I know that women live longer than men, because I know most of the people below the poverty line who are adults are women.
Hmm.
And if they have their own business, it may be the one thing no man can take from them.
Yeah. 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 And there's a lot of, there's a lot of strength in gaining that knowledge, right? I think that, I work with women as well. And I think it's super impactful when you can come together and network together and really lift each other up. I don't believe in the competition thing. I don't even know who my competition is because I don't look.
No,
What
I
I
don't
look
either.
at, yeah, yeah, what I look at is I'm really good at looking at a person and pulling out the genius and wisdom within them. And I think that is such a powerful thing. And that's why I love what you do, because you do that too. You get them into that zone of genius, and they can't see it themselves. I know I didn't see it myself either, right? I am 50, so midlife. Hey,
There
hey,
you
I'm
are.
here.
Hello,
Done
here you are.
arrived, done arrived.
Mhm.
Right. But I've gone through the same thing, right? I went from medical. I was a medical assistant ultrasound for 15 years. Then, chef and executive chef and director for the last like close to 15 years. And so, I'm doing that as well, where I'm like now helping women find their thing too, because I realize, what? We need each other. And one of the biggest things is really supporting someone and realizing that what you're thinking isn't stupid. If you want to start a business, that's not stupid. If you want to do
Mhm.
something creatively different than somebody else is doing, that's amazing. And
Yes.
we used to always think, I can't do that. I can't do that. I can't do that. Right?
Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think it's one of the gifts that can happen at
Yeah.
midlife is that you realize, you know, hey, halftime in the great big game of life,
Yep.
do I want to play the second half the way I've played
Yeah.
it up until now?
Yeah.
And maybe I'm stupid and incompetent and I'm not enough, just like I've been telling myself for fuck ever. But
Right. Right.
maybe I can. And I think at that point, it's like, don't you at least want to try?
Right.
And
Right.
almost everybody
Right.
so far exceeds their own expectations that it's
It's so
like,
true.
this becomes habit for me. I want to keep
Yeah.
going.
Yeah. So how was that for you though? Because I want to ask you about the transition piece, right?
Sure.
Because I know that that's probably what some of the listeners are thinking about right now. How in the world do I leave a job that maybe they have, really risen in, right? So
Yes.
a lot of, like, I know that a lot of people that are listening are business owners, CEOs, big time leaders, right? Chief executive leaders, and so on. So what was that moment for you, and how did that feel when you felt like, wow, wait, I think I've now outgrown this part of my life, or I'm at the
Mhm.
end of this part? What was that like for you, that moment of transition into, maybe this is what I want to do, is be a coach?
I wish I could say it was a moment, Nina.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it was a process. And it was a
Right.
process that involved several things you might not expect. One, my own husband said, "So you're leaving the people that need you most?" That was his
Mm,
initial. I had the entire therapist community that I was part of basically accuse me of going to the dark side because anybody can be a coach, but look at how much you have sacrificed and invested
right.
to become a therapist. Like, what the hell are you
Right.
thinking, Diann? I had the coaches who were totally giving me the side eye, like, what are you doing here? Right. So I really felt like I have to be really clear why I'm doing this and why
Yeah.
I'm doing this now, because nobody accepted me. Like, I don't have therapist colleagues anymore. And most coaches are not real comfortable with me because of my background. So it forced me, Neen, to get really, really clear. Well, why am I doing this?
Mm-hmm.
And how I knew I was ready was a couple of things. One, I realized that was working with, and by that time in my therapy practice, I was working exclusively with midlife women.
Mm-hmm.
I came to the realization with several of my clients that while I felt the therapy had been beneficial to them, while they were healing from abuse, trauma, addiction, childhood issues, loss,
Mm-hmm.
after a time, it seemed like it had just been maintained as kind of what I called a paid friendship. And I
Understood.
started challenging my clients, and I started thinking, and keep in mind that when you're in private practice, you want your clients to keep coming.
Right.
That's your
Right.
livelihood, right?
Right.
But here I was at some point thinking, okay, you've been making the pilgrimage to my office and sitting on my couch week after week, talking about the same thing. And here I am like a wrecking ball trying to get you to let the past go and move forward. Am I actually serving this person when they're just maintaining their functioning and they're
Mm,
not leveling up? And so I
that's so
started
good.
challenging
Yeah.
people harder. I started saying, we've been talking about this for quite some time. Why don't we start thinking more about what you want to do next and about the future? And I noticed that there were many people who were really, really resisting that. And so I reached a point, Neena, where I was becoming a little bit impatient with some of my clients and the fact that they found a place where they felt they were healed enough. They were hanging out there. They were completely resistant to
Mm-hmm.
leveling up,
Mm-hmm.
going to the next stage, or asking anything more of themselves. And I started to notice an emotion that I had never experienced as a therapist before: resentment. I started feeling like I'm kind of feeling judgy towards some of these people because,
Mm-hmm.
and let me be very clear. I make a big distinction between therapy and coaching.
Yes.
Therapy is for insight and for healing.
Yep.
But many people, many people who either have good insurance or the means to pay out of pocket will keep on going. And it becomes, and this is one of the reasons why my therapist colleagues don't like me anymore. I'm going to say something. I think at some point, once they are healed, there's a financial incentive for the therapist to keep them coming.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the person will often adopt this feeling that, well, I've gotten this far because of the therapy. If I stop coming, I'm probably going to tumble all
Go
the way
back.
back down the
Yep.
hill. And
Yep.
some therapists will even imply that.
Mm-hmm.
I started thinking, okay, we've been doing this long enough. It's time for you to go. And then
Right.
I realized, no, it's time for me to go.
Right.
It's time
Right.
for me to go. So I
Right.
did.
Yeah, there's I totally understand what you're saying. I've known people, and I really have. I've known a few people actually who have been to therapy for like 20 years. 20 years. It's
I
like,
know.
I'm like 20 years. Like, what
No,
are
no,
you doing?
and honestly, I had a colleague who was very proud of the fact that he had seen the same clients for anywhere between 15 and 25 years. I used to be a lot more verbally impulsive than I am now. I have ADHD and I have learned how to
Me
manage it
too.
much better, but most entrepreneurs do, in my opinion. But he was proudly proclaiming how he'd been seeing the same therapy clients for up to 25 years. And before I could stop myself, I said, "Shame on you." And
Right.
of course he was taken aback and he said, and I said, "Do you mean to tell me none of them get better and don't need you anymore? Isn't that the whole point?"
Yeah. Yep. And
Well,
that's what my brain would have said.
that
Yep.
didn't go over well,
Yep.
but I really
But
felt
it's
like
facts. It's facts.
being in therapy indefinitely,
Yeah.
I think there comes a point where you have to try your wings. You can always go back, but if you
Hmm.
never try your wings, it's like dreaming about starting a business and then never actually starting one. You
Right.
never know until you try at
That's it.
anything, at
That's it.
anything.
That's it. I love it. So, Diann, tell me now about what you are doing then. What is it that you're doing with these women, or how do you like, like how's your onboarding process? What are you taking them through? Because I know women are like, yes, yes, Diann, yes, tell me about it.
Preach, baby. Okay. So, up until now, for the last several years, Nina, I have been working exclusively one on one. And over the last few months, I have been putting together a group program. So
Good, good.
I'm going to be relaunching that early in the coming year. The people that are best suited to work with me and that I think I'm uniquely qualified to work with tend to be people who were real superstars in their corporate, nonprofit, or academic career. I tend
Mm-hmm,
to work
mm-hmm,
with really smart, highly educated women.
mm-hmm.
I've worked with people with double PhDs, medical doctors, attorneys. I've also worked with hairdressers and all kinds of people who don't have any education at all. But the ones that I find most fascinating and I realize I can really be impactful with are the ones who have been indoctrinated into a professional identity, whether
Mm-hmm.
they're a doctor, an attorney, a physical therapist, whatever they are, and they reach a point where they're like, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to start my own business. But their mindset, and I know you are really into mindset as well,
Mm-hmm.
their mindset, their conditioning, their belief system is all rooted in that past career, which is
Yeah,
there
yeah.
are approved of ways of doing things, and you have to kind of toe the line. Like, I'll give you an example for myself. This will make it very clear. When I was a therapist, I could not swear with my clients. My
Right,
clients would never catch a glimpse of any of my tattoos. They
right,
would not know that I've been divorced a couple times. I was a single parent with 3 kids for a decade. They will not know about the mental illness and alcoholism in my family. They will not
right.
know that I was adopted. So I had all this valuable life experience right here in the brain, but that could never be shared
Yeah,
because that
yeah.
is not the ethics of a professional therapeutic relationship. It's all about the client. Once I became a coach, it was like the brakes came off, and
Mhm.
now I can say whatever I want. I mean, obviously, it's not just self-indulgent. I share things for the purpose of helping people
Yeah.
recognize themselves and think, wow, if she struggled with that, maybe I'm not such a freak.
Right,
So
right.
I feel like there's more access, but I like working with women who have made the leap or are in the process of they're queuing up to make the leap,
Mhm, mhm.
but they actually don't know how to be an entrepreneur. It is a skill set,
It is.
most
It is.
importantly, one that depends on you completely transforming your relationship with failure.
Mhm, mhm,
And when we're
mhm.
in corporate, nonprofit, academic, you do everything you can to avoid failure. But
That's
as an
right.
entrepreneur, you have to cultivate that shit. You have to rush toward it instead of
That's
flee
right.
from it. And
That's so true. That's so true.
it usually takes
Yep,
guidance, support, and accountability in the form of a coach, a mentor, or a community. I think the
yep.
community part is important too.
Yeah, yeah, that's why I'm glad you're building out the group coaching, because that's going to build a beautiful community. I'm actually doing this something similar where I'm building out a coaching thing too, because Dan, as you know, even being in therapy for so long, one-on-one takes a lot of time. takes a lot of time.
For both of
For
you.
both, yes, for both of you, exactly. And sometimes just in the group coaching, even when I've been in group coaching with some of my coaches, I realize how much more I get out of it. It's richer because other people ask questions that I didn't think of,
Yes.
things like that. So it's actually a much better, I think, a much better way of coaching. So I'm glad you're doing that. Community is super important. So if someone is listening and is like, okay, I know that I'm ready for the leap and I want to work with Diann. How is there an onboarding? Do you have a free call? Like, how do they
Mhm.
get in contact with you? How do they work with you?
Well, some people are impulsive like I've always been, and they hear me on your podcast, they jump over to my podcast, The Driven Woman Entrepreneur. They'll binge through a few episodes of that, and then they'll be like, "Where's this woman been all my life?" They
Nice.
get they get
I
a
love
free
you.
they get a free consult. Well, listen, I have had so many people say, "You're who I want to be when I grow up."
Yeah, no, I
When
love
take
that.
me? When will you take me? And I do screen my clients. I honestly
You need to. You have to.
I
Yeah.
turn more people away than I
Yeah.
accept
Yeah.
because it's why I pulled
Same.
the plug on the launch of my new group program. It's
Right.
not that I didn't get enough signups. I didn't get enough of the right people
Right.
who were at the right place and would play well with the others. And
Yeah.
that's really important to me because
Yeah.
I came from a field that has a lot of integrity,
Mm-hmm.
and that part I kept. So
Mm-hmm.
you can find me on the Driven Woman Entrepreneur podcast, and you can binge through all of that. You can follow me on LinkedIn or Instagram at Coach Diann Wingert. You can take my quiz called What's Holding You Back. And you
Awesome.
can sign up for a free consult if you are raring to go and think I might be the person to help you level up.
Yeah, you know what? I'm hopping on that podcast because you're such a straight shooter, and I love that, right? I love finding women who are not afraid to speak the truth, who are not afraid to tell you what's up. I think that is just such a powerful thing to carry, right? I mean, I do respect women also who are a little bit softer, a little bit. I respect that. I'm not that. I'm a little bit more energetic, a little bit more ADHD, a little bit more in your face. I
Mhm.
just kind of
Yep.
I feel like I don't have the capacity to hold things in, so it just kind of comes out. And so, what are you gonna do? I'm a straight talker.
Well, people and listen, they are duly warned because this is the name of your podcast. There's no
Right.
sugarcoating. You know it's funny though on this topic. I'm really curious to know what your thoughts are on this, Neena.
Hmm.
I know the ADHD plays a part,
Hmm.
right? I know the my professional training and I've done a lot of public speaking. I know that plays a part too. But I'm curious if you think that the trauma that you and I both have in our history, that we
Yeah.
survived, that we experienced post traumatic growth as a
Hmm.
result of, do you think that that plays a significant part in how bold, direct,
Hundred
and
percent.
powerful you are? See, I do too.
Yeah, 100%. Because when I was traumatized, not many people listened to me when I was younger,
Mm,
but
mm.
I built up this resilience from within me where I was going to I and even as a little kid, I remember thinking strategically like how I'm going to get out of this and how I won't be like this person and how I won't, do this
Same,
kind of thing. Yeah, I think it has a huge part to play in it. That's why I don't regret any of my past. I always
same.
think that is such a beautiful. I always said life is my best life coach because it
Mm.
kicked my ass and showed me some lessons, right? But it also pushed me forward. And so I 100% agree with that. Yeah,
Yeah, when people
beautiful.
say, "Oh, I'm so sorry for what you've been through," and I say,
Oh,
"I'm
no,
not."
no, no. Yeah,
This
exactly. No.
this life has been like build a bitch, okay? And if I
I
had
love it. Yes.
if I have not been through everything I've been
Oh
through,
my
I would not
gosh.
be the person that you are impressed with right now. I know it.
I'm stealing that, Diane. I am freaking stealing. I'm telling all of you guys now live. I am stealing that shit right there. Built a bitch. I love it. That was awesome. That was such a look. That was one of these. That was a Mic drop moment.
There we
Let's drop
go.
the mic.
Ba-bam.
You are so awesome, Diann. Thank you so much for being on Straight Talk. I so appreciate your time. Thank you.
Totally
Thank
my
you.
pleasure, Neena.
So cool, guys. I know, right? She's amazing. I told you guys I find the best humans on the planet. Make sure that you follow Diann. I am going to link all of her information below so that you can work with her, go listen to her podcast, the whole thing. I'm heading over there myself, so I can't wait to listen to it. You guys are amazing. You're the best. Thank you for love and sharing and all that great stuff that you do. You take care of yourself. This is Neena Perez. Straight talk, no sugar added. Build a bitch. Until next time.